Hi, John the OCDoc here. Today's video is about the updated OPNAV 8020/6 revised June 2018. In contrast to the previous update of September 2015, this update was done primarily by the folks at OPNAV, so don't blame me. Okay, also there was a snafu with releasing the form. It was inadvertently released April 2018, and there's a date on that form, but that was not authorized. The authorized version is dated June 2018. Except for planes, trains, submarines, and surface ships, this form is to certify operators of virtually all Navy vehicles. There is, of course, one exception. The OPNAV 8020/6 no longer applies to government employee civilians driving commercial motor vehicles or vehicles carrying hazardous materials, including explosives, on the highway. By the way, in this video, when I do talk about those vehicles, that is, commercial motor vehicles or vehicles carrying hazardous materials, they will be considered together as the same requirements apply to operators of both vehicles. So if I say DOT drivers or commercial motor vehicle drivers or CMV drivers or truckers, that also includes operators of vehicles carrying explosives. Certifications on government employee drivers are to use only the forms required by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration or FMCSA. We'll get to that later. First, a little background. As you can imagine, the Navy has many kinds of vehicles. Anything you can sit or stand in or on that has a steering wheel or steering levers may be considered a vehicle. A forklift is a vehicle, so is a crane or a bulldozer. Basically, anything except a riding lawnmower is considered a vehicle whose operator needs medical clearance. The Navy has several documents providing guidance and stating requirements for operators of its vehicles. Those documents can be confusing. Keeping up with and keeping straight what applies to whom has been challenging. The OPNAV 8020/6 was designed to help. To clarify, the 8020/6 does not replace the guidance documents. It helps the medical examiner and the supervisor to keep track of medical certifications and certification durations. When we looked at all those requirements, a hierarchy of requirements became apparent. The most stringent requirements are for DOT drivers, which makes sense. The least stringent requirements are for operators of sedans and pickups. In other words, the regular vehicles commonly driven by anyone with a regular driver's license. To come across a hierarchy of requirements that is logical may not seem like anything noteworthy, but believe me, after working for the government for quite a few years, it is. So, we identified 7 categories of vehicle operators and labeled them A through G. After all that, to keep us on our toes, the Department of Transportation, or DOT, developed a new set of forms for DOT drivers. To avoid duplicate effort, the Navy now requires only the DOT forms for Category A, that's CMV or DOT drivers. Let's go through the categories. Category A, civilian drivers of commercial motor vehicles and vehicles carrying explosives. Category B, military drivers of CMVs and vehicles carrying explosives. The other categories apply to both civilian and military. Category C is operators of weight handling equipment, for example, and especially cranes. Category D, explosive handlers and operators of non-highway explosives material handling equipment, including and especially forklifts. Category E, non-highway use of material handling equipment not carrying explosives. Category F, operators of civil engineering support equipment, for example, bulldozers and earth movers. Category G, operators of highway use vehicles not requiring a commercial driver's license. In other words, the kind of vehicle you probably drive to get to work, except it's owned by the Navy. Here's a table of those categories, which I'll try to post below this video. The way the categories are set up, a driver of any category is automatically considered medically qualified to operate vehicles of all lower categories. For example, a crane operator, Category C, is considered medically qualified to drive forklifts, Category D and Category E, bulldozers, Category F, and sedans, Category G, without getting another physical exam. It's like saying anyone capable of doing 20 push-ups is automatically capable of doing 10 push-ups. To fill out the form, the medical examiner does the exam, then chooses the highest category the person is qualified for from the drop-down list in the upper right of the form. That's the big square box. The form filler will notice that category A is not listed. The 2015 version of the form had category A there. It is no longer there. This is not an error of omission. No siree. This is intentional. Look at the description of category A in the form. It says category A must use the MCSA 5876 Medical Examiner Certificate. That's the DOT form I mentioned earlier. At this point, the examiner has two choices. He or she can keep clicking the down arrow if perhaps A might suddenly appear. Every 3 attempts should be followed by rereading the description of category A. At some point, the light may go on and the other choice can be attempted. What is the other choice? He or she can complete the MCSA 5876 Medical Examiner Certificate. There is no need for the 8020/6 unless the driver also drives a crane or forklift or other vehicle. If the person is a civilian DOT driver, the medical examiner must be listed on the National Registry of Certified Medical Examiners. Those examiners are aware that certain online forms are required. So if you are an NRCME examiner, just fill out those forms and you are good to go. By the way, the 8020/6 is for the supervisor, not for medical. Do you care if there is an 8020/6? The medical department doesn't care. I don't care. Why would we care if there's an 8020/6? Now, if you complete the 8020/6, you should make a copy for the medical record, but the form is to help the supervisor. If the supervisor recognizes that anyone with the MCSA 5876 Medical Examiner Certificate is also qualified for categories C through G, the supervisor may not ask for the 8020/6. However, it's likely the supervisor will ask for it, so the medical examiner might as well complete the 8020/6, but only if the worker will be operating vehicles other than CMVs. Okay, now for some details about the form. Like the previous version of the 8020/6, the new 8020/6 can be completed using a computer. It can be completed using a pen. It can even be completed using a crayon, provided the crayon is reasonably sharp. The box labeled Restrictions cannot have any restrictions that apply to categories A or B. Do not try to limit civilian commercial motor vehicle drivers by writing something like Navy use only. A civilian DOT driver will have the MCSA 5876. Police will not check the 8020/6. Writing Navy use only on the 8020/6 is meaningless. Putting it on the MCSA 5876 is also meaningless. Stop being a control freak and let the driver make a little money after hours. I mean, really, guys, the trucker is either medically qualified or not. If the civilian trucker is medically qualified to drive for the Navy, he's qualified to drive off-duty. If you're really concerned about his medical qualification to drive, don't let him loose on the public, whether driving for the Navy or not. One place in the form that may need a little explanation is the box labeled Driver or Handler Medical Certification Expiration Date, list by category if dates differ. The curious or OCD provider may have noticed in his bedtime perusing of vehicle guidance documents that the periodicity of the categories is not uniform. That is, categories A and B are certified for 2 years maximum, but category E is certified for up to 5 years. What to do? Here's where that box labeled Driver or Handler Medical Certification Expiration Date, list by category if dates differ, comes in. Just write the category and expiration date of certification for that category, like this, or simply this. You can make them both expire at the shorter date to ensure no confusion, or just because you're lazy. By the way, the duration of certification is the maximum length permitted. The medical examiner may certainly certify for a shorter period if he or she feels that is more appropriate. For example, if the driver's blood pressure requires only 3-month certification for a Category A driver who is also a forklift operator, the examiner can also write a 3-month forklift certification for that worker, or any other duration but no more than 5 years. The examiner or his minions are to complete all the form except the driver's signature and examiner's signature. The minions should not forge the examiner's signature or the driver's signature. If you're a minion, remember that forgery is not part of your job description. Forgery is out. Likewise, the driver's signature must be written by the driver who is referred to on the form, ever so surprisingly, as the driver or handler. Independent duty corpsmen have the same limitations as for other medical care. IDCs are only to examine active duty, as only active duty fall under the IDC's authorized scope of practice. Putting a civilian behind a steering wheel does not somehow expand the IDC's scope of practice. If you are an IDC, has your activity been using IDCs to examine civilians? If so, have they made up for it by giving you weekly trips to the spa? Annual vacations to Hawaii? If not, stop examining civilians and inform your command that you will no longer follow that practice. That brings up another issue. As mentioned previously, civilian employees that drive commercial motor vehicles must be examined by a medical examiner listed with the NRCME. If you don't know what that is, you are not listed with them. If you are one of them, you will have an FMCSA issued identification number and must complete a DOT exam form for each examinee seeking a Category A qualification. Military CMV drivers, that is, Category B, do not need an NRCME listed examiner to certify them. The driver must meet the same DOT standards, but the medical examiner who certifies that the driver meets those standards does not have to be NRCME listed. While I'm at it, I'll address Category G, sedans, pickup trucks, and small vans. If a driver has a driver's license issued by a state, he or she can drive Category G vehicles. No medical exam is necessary. No OPNAV 8020/6 is necessary. However, if the supervisor is concerned that an employee's medical condition might interfere with the employee's ability to safely drive, the supervisor can send the driver for a medical exam. Technically, supervisors should check on their drivers every 4 years. That does not mean they should send their drivers for exams. They just need to check that the health of their drivers is not a concern with regard to driving safety. If you find yourself examining a bunch of minivan drivers, contact the supervisor and ask what the medical condition of concern is. If there isn't one, reassure the supervisor that an exam is unnecessary and send the workers back. If the supervisor insists, refuse. Such exams waste clinic resources, especially clinician time. Realistically, if there truly is a concern, the best course of action may be to have human resources schedule a fitness for duty exam to evaluate the worker for the specific condition of concern. Now, despite the logical hierarchy of categories, you may be concerned about some rather illogical or inconsistent aspects of this whole setup. For example, the DOD does not have to comply with DOT requirements for drivers. Why does the DOD choose to do this? And if the DOD requires NRCME listed examiners to examine civilian employee drivers, why doesn't it require that for military drivers? While we're at it, why does the DOD allow military drivers younger than 21 years old to drive big rigs, whereas the DOT's minimum age is 21? For now, the answers to those questions will remain a mystery. Well, that's about wraps it up for the 8020/6 revised June 2018. John the OCDOC, over and out.